Hi everyone! If you've been following the TV show You, then you definitely don't want to miss out on this episode summary for Season 4, Episode 1. Here we'll catch up on all the exciting events that took place since the Season 3 cliffhanger. Starting with what Joe does after staging his death to searching for the mysterious Marianne in Paris, and learning her whereabouts through sweet-talking the seller. Joe was relentless when it comes to reuniting with Marianne, and didn't give up until he got to London where they finally meet. But even after weeks of searching, Joe's reunion with Marianne didn't turn out the way he had hoped, as she drew a knife out of her purse and accuses Joe of being a killer. Shattered by the situation, Joe has no other option but to prove to Marianne he is not a killer and let her go. The broken-hearted Joe then falls prey to the hired hitman by Love's father, Ray Quinn. But instead of killing him, the hitman offers Joe a fresh start in London with a new identity as Professor Jonathan Moore and a job at the university as a literature professor. It seemed Joe could finally get an honest life until his white knight complex kicks in and he meets Kate and becomes infatuated. Our mysterious story takes a rather unexpected turn when Joe blackouts from drinking too much. Joe wakes up in his apartment to the shock of his life. Malcolm has been stabbed in his kitchen, and the murderer is still unknown. From here, Joe takes us on an unbelievably suspenseful ride, as he sets out to discover who the killer is and find redemption for himself. That was a rough overview of what's on the menu for this episode, so if you're not convinced yet, make sure to like this video. Wink. So to go over what we focused on in this episode, it was Joe's search for Marianne and his reunion with her, Joe's fresh start in London as Jonathan Moore, and finally, Joe's battle to find redemption, while taking us on a thrilling journey to find the killer that's still out there. So don't miss out and keep watching to see where this suspenseful journey will end up next. After staging his death, Joe goes to Europe in search of Marianne. Armed with Love's fortune, Joe arrives in Paris to start his European journey. He makes his way to numerous art galleries, only to walk away frustrated, desperately trying to find some sign of Marianne. Until one day Joe's hopes get rekindled after spotting one of Marianne's paintings at a fair. In an effort to find out more, Joe sweet-talks the seller who clues him in on Marianne's email and her presence at the Acanthus Art Fair in London. Joe instantly packs and goes to London, determined to finally reunite with Marianne. After long weeks of searching, Joe finally finds her lurking around a corner. All the energy in Joe's body rushes to his chest and he can't help but run to her. But when he finally embraces her, Marianne is scared like never before, and she pushes him away, drawing a knife from her bag. Joe can see the fear in her eyes and decides to do the only thing he can to prove her wrong: let her go. Joe's heart is broken, but he knows he can't be a killer anymore. Fate has other plans for him, though. While drawing his sorrows in a pub, Joe is cornered by Elliot, Adam James, a hitman hired by Love's father, Ray Quinn, Michael Riley Burke. Joe is convinced this is the end, but instead he is presented with the opportunity to make a fresh start in London. It is here Joe learns the hitman is on his own path to redemption and doesn't want to be a killer anymore. Elliot gifts Joe with a fake passport and working visa, giving him the option of starting a new life as long as he agrees to get rid of Marianne, the only person that knows he's still alive. Joe agrees to the terms, but instead of getting rid of Marianne, he steals her necklace to prove he did the hitman's bidding. After bidding farewell to Elliot, Joe watches Marianne return to Paris and sets off to his new home in London with a clean slate as Professor Jonathan Moore. Joe's search for a fresh start in London results in him having to blend in with wealthy people he despises. Besides, the successful professor is seemingly not so successful when it comes to avoiding trouble. After all, Joe meets Kate, Charlotte Ritchie. The same evening he moves in an apartment next to Malcolm's, Stephen Hagen. Joe's white knight complex kicks in again and he saves Kate from being mugged. When he requests she doesn't mention him to the police, Kate agrees to respect Joe's secret, seeing he is uneasy about his working visa. However, Malcolm needs a bigger reward and apologizes to Joe by dragging him to a nightclub, the Sundry House. Here, Joe meets a new batch of intriguing personalities. These people are a totally different species of wealthy than what Joe is used to in New York. First, there is Lady Phoebe, Tilly Keeper, an aristocratic celebrity who is charmingly sweet and gentle. Her boyfriend, Adam Pratt, Lucas Gage, is a self-made man who appeared poor, but is in fact richer than those born into it. As for those that did attain wealth, there is Blessing, Ozioma Wenu, a heartless woman who stepped on her way to the top, and another set of wealthy siblings consisting of Simon, Aiden Cheng, a tortured artist, and Sophie, Nikki Lin, an Instagram celebrity. Although Joe doesn't feel he fits in with this bunch, particularly with the raving Malcolm, he eventually finds common ground with Reese, Ed Spaliers. Those true conversations about Joe's dreams of redemption are unfortunately forgotten when Joe drinks until he blacks out the same night. After waking up with a massive hangover and Malcolm lying dead in his living room, Joe instantaneously assumes he is to blame and starts devising a plan to get rid of the body. With his blackouts and Malcolm's missing phone and finger, Joe can't help but be suspicious. However, the dread doesn't stop him from wanting to keep his new life and avoid an investigation. He chops the body into smaller pieces and throws them into the river in trash bags, so that even if they are found, they still can't help the police to identify the victim. Joe gets back to Sundry House driven by his need to keep his promise to Kate and Reese's words still resonating. But before dinner, his phone rings, and an anonymous person tells him they were the one who killed Malcolm and want to pin the blame on Joe. It is here viewers learn Joe is no longer avoiding an investigation, but he will actually have to figure out who's the killer and stop them from ruining his fake identity. Elliot, Adam James, resurfaces in Joe's life with a proposal that threatens to ruin Joe's chances of having a fresh start in London. He reveals himself to be a hitman hired by Ray Quinn, Michael Riley Burke, and gifts Joe a fake passport and work visa in exchange for him getting rid of Marianne, the only person that knows he's alive, and the money he'd taken from Love's account before Season 3's finale. Joe agrees, but chooses not to kill Marianne. Instead, he steals her necklace and gives it to Elliot, who, satisfied in knowing Joe could still play with the rules, returns to America. Joe, who thought he was to be killed himself, is rendered speechless. His still largely romantic teenage mentality envisioned London as a place of potential starting over with nobody knowing who he is. Elliot's generosity, instead, allows him to become Jonathan Moore and start his new life the right way, with a valid passport and a job. After a short bit of research, he scores the position of literature professor at a university. Although Joe's plan was to keep a low profile, his enthusiasm with Elliot's gift leads him to almost immediately explore London and its wonders. He begins by visiting popular tourist spots like the Tower of London, Big Ben, and the London Eye. With each new day, he visits more places and learns more about the culture. Joe even manages to find little bookstores and local published authors, such as Reese, who Joe realizes wrote the book he deeply connected with. Joe's charm allows him to build a relationship with Reese. In talking to him and observing the people of London, Joe takes in the idea that while not everyone is pure and good, not everyone is as bad as he concluded himself to be. Joe also meets a colorful cast of characters as he explores London, who will return to haunt him in later episodes. First, there's Lady Phoebe, Tilly Keeper, an apparently sweet and kind girl who grew up in tabloids for being an aristocratic celebrity. Phoebe's boyfriend, Adam Pratt, Lucas Gage, is the owner of Sundry House and tries to pretend to be an alternative kind of man while still building a temple for his wealthy friends. Phoebe also introduces Jonathan to Blessing, Ozioma Wenu, a heartless woman who built her fortune by exploiting others in pyramid schemes. There is also Simon, Aiden Chung, a man who pretends to be a tortured artist while using his dad's money to fund his career. Sophie, Nikki Lynn, Simon's sister, is a talented businesswoman who used her MBA to become an Instagram celebrity who makes money through sponsorships. Joe is not eager to mingle with these wealthy people. However, he then meets Kate, Charlotte Ritchie, a hard-working art gallery wonder, and Malcolm's girlfriend, who captures his admiration. Kate invites Joe for a dinner with the whole rich gang, and telling him he made an impression on Phoebe, and warning him about how the lady will gossip about the man who refuses her invitation for dinner. Joe agrees to go in order to avoid unwanted attention from tabloids. The night ends with Joe coming back to his apartment, drunk and out of control. What he will find as he regains consciousness is his life changing forever. Joe finds a genuine human connection in Reese, Ed Spaliers, an author of a book Joe read and admired while living in the suburbs. Reese comes from a poor family and a hard childhood, only becoming well off after finding out he was the heir of a duke. So, like Joe, Reese understands people born into money are a totally different species. Joe reluctantly agrees to join the party, drinking to the point of total blackout. When Joe wakes up the next morning, he finds the lifeless body of Malcolm on top of his kitchen table, stabbed in the chest. Joe, convinced he killed him, is prepared to accept his flaws and obsessions. But before he can go down the path of being a criminal, he decides to dispose of the body. Joe rolls the corpse into a carpet and drives to a sawmill. After taking advantage of the night guard's break, Joe chops Malcolm into smaller pieces before throwing the trash bags with different body parts into the river. Joe then returns to the Sundry house in order to give back the rainbow coat he found on himself when he regained consciousness. While there, Joe reflects on Reese's conversation the night before, when the author shared his thoughts on embracing your errors in order to achieve true redemption. Joe also briefly meets Kate there, who appears to be deeply shattered by the inexplicable death of her boyfriend. When his phone rings, Joe is then pushed down an unexpected path. He finds out that the person on the other side of the line is the true killer, and is now determined to pin the blame on Joe. Joe's freshly forged identity is at risk, and now he will have to find the killer and keep him from ruining his true identity. In order for him to remain free, Joe has to dive deep into the company he despises and figure out who's the real villain. There's another connection Joe establishes in London, a relationship that's as appealing as it is frightening. Lady Phoebe, Tilly Keeper, is an aristocratic celebrity, the type of girl who grew up exposed to the tabloids and believes money justifies her narcissism. Still, she ends up introducing Jonathan to some of the most important people in his new city. First, there's her boyfriend, Adam Pratt, Lucas Gage, the owner of Sundry House and pretender of being an alternative man. Phoebe and Adam also introduce Joe to Blessing, Ozioma Wenu, a heartless woman who built her fortune by exploiting others through pyramid schemes. There's also Simon, Aiden Cheng, a pseudo-tormented artist who uses his dad's dough to fund his artsy career. Finally, there's Sophie, Nikki Lynn, Simon's sister, who applied her MBA to become an Instagram celebrity. The group seems to be drawn to Joe, and he soon finds himself in the core of their social circle. Despite his attempts at respecting their boundaries and keeping his distance, Joe soon starts to see past the deep pockets and discover their insecurities, hopes, and desires. Not only do the wealthy young guns have a lot in common with Joe, but the professor can actually relate to them. Joe's saving grace remains his obsession with finding the real killer. As such, Joe uses the company of the rich as a way to understand their lives and habits, becoming an insider within his new circle. He meets with Simon, Sophie, and Blessing in secret, trying to find out as much information as he can so he can identify the killer. It's an uphill battle, but Joe is dedicated to proving his innocence, even if that means getting deeper and deeper into the darkness of London's elite underbelly. As Joe dives deeper into his investigation, his world quickly dissolves into a living hell. After surviving suburban hell, Joe is not eager to mingle with more rich people, but it seems like Joe can't escape the dungeon he created for himself. One evening, Joe watches from his window as Kate gets mugged in the university's parking lot. Due to his white knight complex, Joe intervenes and saves Kate from the criminals, asking her not to mention him to the police since his working visa is shaky. Joe avoids further investigation, which could reveal his true identity and make Ray Quinn send other hitmen after him. Kate seemingly agrees to respect Joe's secret, but Malcolm decides he deserves a bigger reward. To show how grateful he is to Jonathan for saving Kate from the robbers, Malcolm drags his colleague to Sundry House, a nightclub for the rich. Joe cannot escape the invitation, and ends up being the only poor person in a room full of privileged aristocrats. Bored by his mundane life, Joe is also attracted to Kate, and gives in to his obsession by researching more about the woman. Still, he promises to himself to get out of trouble. There are some funny things about Malcolm, as his phone is broken and his little finger is missing. Joe doesn't pay this much attention, though, blaming it all on the booze. While he might be morally defeated, Joe still wants to remain a free man living his new European life. So he drinks to the point of total blackout and returns to the Sundry House to give back a rainbow coat he found over himself when he regained consciousness on his couch. However, something happens before dinner. Something that pulls the rug under our feet and ensures fans the series is moving in a new and exciting direction. Joe's phone rings and he gets notifications from an anonymous message app he never installed. The person on the other side admits to having killed Malcolm and wants to pin the blame on Joe. But seeing how Joe disposed of the body, the real killer is now intrigued and wants to know more about the professor. Now Joe is no longer avoiding an investigation, but he will actually have to figure out who's the killer and stop them from ruining his fake identity. After 3 seasons of Joe running away from authorities, the killer is now investigating a murder, and everyone is a suspect. Find out who the killer is by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and of course to tune in next time.